Tulsa Titans are those in our city who aren't backing down. They stay positive when things look hard. They lead with integrity, even when it requires sacrifice. They take their family life as serious as their work life. This show features them to teach and inspire the next generation.
Welcome to
among us.
Tulsa Titans, highlighting our local professionals who are making a difference. Today, I'm really excited. I've got Mike King with me. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm doing very good. Mike is one of the founding members of Winners and King, and he's also a municipal court judge. Mike, can you tell us just a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I'm a graduate of the ORU School of Law, and I've been in Tulsa. Tom and I became partners a couple of years out of law school, and we established Winners and King, and I've been practicing law in Tulsa and from there pretty much all over the country for 30 plus years, and married, 2 kids, and enjoying life.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you said life this last year, you're a little bit more at home. You're not having to take the long plane rides. So I'm interested with the way that things have changed. And obviously, we're digitally today. What are 3 things that you're consuming more of because of this season? What are 3 things that you're consuming less of?
Well, one of the things you find when you get to this point in your life is there's not a lot of change. I mean, I have a pretty consistent routine. I like to read, so I've probably gotten to read more. I enjoy some time in the morning by myself with my Bible. So there's much less interruption with regard to that. When you're on the road, that becomes a more difficult thing. I mean, you do it, but it's difficult. I've got lots of resources. I have my own library in my house, which is just kind of my space. So lots of resources and that I can reach out and grab if I'm studying on something, or if I have an issue that's going on and I'm just looking for a little guidance and that sort of stuff. That becomes easier when you're not traveling like I typically do. And then again, you can take your books with you if you want to, but it just becomes a little more difficult. I tend to rely more on a Kindle or an iPad when I'm on the road. So I guess I'm consuming more hardcover books, which I really like. I like to hold the book when I'm reading, and less of, well, I'd like to say I'm consuming less food, but that's not really the case. I wish it were. I can't really think of anything. I mean, my life's been pretty set for the last decade or so, and I kind of have my routine and I continue in it.
Well, in the last decade or so, we were talking kind of offline. You keep busy in kind of in this stage in your life. Looking back, what's 1 or 2 habits that over time that has really made you successful?
Well, as I indicated, to me, probably the 2 things. I mean, I have consistently gotten up pretty early in the morning and gone to my library and spent some time with my Lord, and that there's a settling effect that comes with doing that on a daily basis that has impacted me. And in conjunction with that, probably 30 years ago, I started journaling. Now, I don't do long journals, but I do pretty short journals about things that are going on in my life and things that I'm praying about, and things that are, bothering me. And then I, every year I set a series of goals, and I have that stuff in writing. So I periodically check it to see where I am. And one of the things that I've noticed after I've been doing it about 10 years that I've found extremely beneficial is to go back 5, 6, 7 years and look at the kinds of things that maybe you were struggling with, or the kinds of things that were going on in your life, and then see the resolution of those. And watching that happen over and over and over again, it tends to make you a little less anxious about the things you're dealing with presently. So if I had to say the 2 things, number 1 is the quiet time, and number 2 is the journaling.
Man, that's awesome. So I had this conversation with a group of men last week. They were getting up and then trying to instill the discipline of reading the Bible or setting that mindset before the day started. So I'm really interested to ask you this, because you've done it for a long time. We kind of got into, there's the digital technology. You mentioned Kindle. So they have a YouVersion app, and they do a daily prayer where they check it off, and they kind of felt like they were in routine and not really getting anything out of it. And really what we pinpointed was a good part of the quiet time is actually not reading the word. It's truly being quiet and listening. Can you shed a little light on what that looks like for you?
Sure. Yeah. So I've got some Bible reading that I do, a planned Bible reading. One of the things that I've done over the years is I have uh, acquired a number of different kinds of translations, and I don't mean King James version translations. Like I have a Hebrew Bible. I have a translation that was written by an Orthodox guy on the New Testament. So I have lots of different kind of biblical resources, which keeps it fresh for me. So I keep doing that. But that's just a portion of the time. The other portion of the time, I might spend talking to the Lord, and then the thing that probably became the most difficult for me that I've learned, over the years is just sitting there and being quiet and listening. It's amazing what you'll hear. So, and that's kind of, it's about 30 minutes, sometimes a little longer than that in the morning, but it's consistent every morning. I have a little different habit on the weekends. I read something different. I do another part of the house, and it's a little more relaxed. But it's pretty much every morning, with the exception of Sunday morning, which I almost always am in church.
Well, great. Well, thank you for shedding some light on that. And then, so reflection, I love that you teed that up too, is your journaling and going back and looking over some of the anxiety or the worries that you had at one point, and maybe watching God even get you through those seasons. And that's lighten the load now, regardless of how much work you have on your plate. Is that what you're saying?
Not only the work, it's also just with regard to other things that are going on in your life. I mean, things that, I think the older you get, you sort of progress this way. Maybe I shouldn't assume that for everybody, but for me, you sort of progress this way anyway, which is just things that seem so very important 20 years ago that created anxiety. I mean, things with my kids, or things with, coworkers, or things with, stuff that was going on in church, or even stuff that's going on in the country. I think I've gotten through presidential cycles much easier recently, just simply because when you look back, I mean, if you have this journal like I've got, and you see all of these things that seem they had to be pretty important for me to write them in my journal. So it was either something that was causing me some anxiety, or I was trying to work on something, or something that I felt like I needed to do something about or monitor. So there's significant aspects to my life during those periods of time. And I look back on them now, and I also journal resolutions. So if it's something I'm dealing with for a year or something like that, and then it resolves, I journal how it resolved. And it's just amazing when you look back on that, and then you think about what you're dealing with today. And I can't describe it any other way than to just suggest to you that there's a level of peace that comes from rehearsing the resolutions of previous issues that you were dealing with. So it just comes down to you just sort of get the sense of, well, that all got taken care of. Why should I worry about this? This eventually will get taken care of. Maybe not always the way I want it, but generally speaking, you move on. And somebody once told me, don't sweat the small stuff. And what I found by my quiet time and journaling and rehearsing those things is it's pretty much all small stuff. So
we lend to, looking at emotion and things in ourselves, we lend to giving too much authority maybe at times to things in our lives in that season too, huh?
Yeah. Well, that's another really big deal about getting quiet, And again, if it's consistent and you're doing it all the time, it's not just because you're under a lot of pressure and so it's time to go pray and listen. But if consistently doing it, when you get quiet, I tend to hear things that make me feel like that's not a big deal. Okay. And I mean, I lost my dad a year ago, January. Very difficult. very, very difficult period of time, because, he's a big part of my life, and a great guy. But the blessing was that I had the year before, my wife and I usually leave Tulsa in January. Now we go someplace where it's a little warmer, and I just work from there.
Yeah.
And we've been going to Florida and going to Florida. And I just, in one of my quiet times, had gotten the sense, I think you need to go to Arizona this year. I didn't really know why. This is a year in advance. And, 2 weeks before we're supposed to be out there, I find out my dad's diagnosed with a, serious issue. And then, I get there, I spend pretty much the whole month of January with him. He passes away towards the end of my time in Phoenix, but soon enough that I got to preach his funeral. And so while that was a very difficult time, when I look back on it, I just see the Lord's hand in that. And, it's very comforting. And when you have that, and that's very much in my journaling, the next time I have to deal with something like that, I can look back on that and just, there's a peace that comes with doing that sort of stuff. So makes a difference to me.
That's awesome. That's definitely some gold. Thank you for sharing that, especially what that looked like walking through that with your dad. It's going to be very part of a special moment to preach a funeral.
Yeah. It's my dad was a veteran, 28 years in the military, and served in Vietnam. And until he passed away, I was unaware of the fact that he had won a Bronze Star. So I found it, and of course there are no details, and I'll never know exactly what it is that he did to earn the Bronze Star, but I put it in a little shadow box along with some pictures of him, and I've got it hanging around here. But the funeral itself was really special, and it was nice to be able to stand up there and do it. And I was great until the guy came with the flag and knelt down in front of my mom and said, with the gratitude, or from a grateful nation, I just want to say thank you for your husband's service. Then I about lost it, but it's a really special thing to me that I got to do that. So, and I miss him, but I'll get to see him again. So
that's awesome. My dad's played a huge role in my life too. And at some point talking to you, I wanted to ask you, your professional career, because you do a lot, but who are some of the people you admire? One of the guesses I'm going to say is probably your dad.
Yeah, he'd probably be number one. So, there are a lot of people I admire, but there are only probably a couple of people that I've tried to pattern my life after. And so, and for specific reasons. So from my dad's standpoint, his work ethic, and I mean, he just taught me how important it was to do your job well and to do it the best you can. And so that was one. And then the only really other person I could point to is Abraham Lincoln, who I'm a huge Abraham Lincoln fan. And, the whole team of rivals thing. And, to me, that's leadership. I mean, when you can bring all these people who initially thought you were just a country bumpkin and who came alongside to work with you thinking you're going to fall on your face and they'd be there to pick up the pieces, who eventually, were devastated by your death because of the kind of leadership skills that you displayed through what is a very difficult period of time in this country. So I'm a big Lincoln fan, and those two are the ones that I would say are the human beings, apart from spiritual stuff. That's those two are sort of my heroes.
Well, in this season in life, what's your why? So those are some people you admire, but what gets you personally out of bed every morning, and what gets you working hard at this age at Winters and King, and still making time to serve the city of Sand Springs?
I am one of those seriously blessed people who found a career that I absolutely love. So my problem is not getting out of bed in the morning. My problem is getting into bed at night quitting and stopping. And, as we talked about, before we started this, is sort of this life work balance where you got to stop at some point. I have over the years worked 60, 70 hours a week, and I'll work at home. And a lot of that is just simply because the other options, watching television or doing other things other than family things, are not near as interesting to me or don't bring me near as much joy as the practice of law does. So I'm so blessed in that regard. So, that I just absolutely love what I do. And somebody asked me the other day, when will you retire? And I told them when they wheel me out of here and on a gurney, because I don't know how to do anything else. And there's really not much other than golf. And I love to play golf. It's kind of my, my wife and I exercise and we do yoga and we do stuff to try to keep ourselves healthy. But just in terms of something that I would do on a daily basis, I would expect to work a little less and to volunteer a little more. But, I just love what I do.
No, that's great. And that should be what everybody strives for, is something that they are gifted and talented in, but they have passion with them. What, you and I did talk about work-life balance and working as much as you always have. You said you guarded the weekends at this season in life. And I'm really interested because I'm around a lot of young professionals and they feel like they're trapped in that. I have to work 100 hours, not necessarily maybe that they love it, just to prove themselves. What would you tell those young professionals?
Yeah. So and again, I would not presume to tell somebody else how to live their life, but I'll tell you what worked for me. And there were a couple of things that were absolutes for me. I was going to coach my kids in whatever athletic endeavor they chose to participate in. So I made time to do that. And if that meant leaving the office at 4:30 to make it to a game and then having to sit in the evening after they'd gone to bed for a couple of hours, so I finished up what I needed to do, then that's what it meant. The other thing is that I didn't want my kids to think of me as a stranger. So, you just have to learn to go and make time for them. And the way I did it, because I'm married to a saint of a woman, and she was like an absolute wonderful mother. But there are just times that kids need to be around their dad, and so the weekends for me, I mean, if I had to stay late in the evening, I tried to always make it during the weekday, and on the weekends, they just kind of knew, I was there, and I've tried to carry that over. Even with my wife now that my kids are grown, I generally work Saturday mornings now, but I quit by noon, and then she and I try to turn the phone off, and then she and I spend time doing stuff that we like to do on Saturday and Sundays, and then we just go and do things as we want them.
I like that you turn the phone off. What do you think about all these people at dinner as a family looking at their smartphones?
Yeah, well, I wish I could tell you that I am great at it, because I have my own challenges and occasionally somebody has to say something to me. But I try as best I can on the weekends with her to just kind of say, look, this is a time, and as a lawyer, sometimes that's difficult because, clients know you have a smartphone now. And so, that I've had some people get frustrated. Well, it was, I needed you and you weren't there. And, you have to learn to say no. It's a little easier for me now. I'm at that point in my life where, somebody's terrifically unhappy because I can't call them back. It's a lot easier for me to say, look, I'm really sorry, but if you're unhappy, then, you can go be unhappy someplace else. And it's not that big a deal for me.
No, that's good. Glad you get the reflection book to show you that too, right?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's again, just because others who you're trying to help don't have a good work-life balance doesn't necessarily mean that they should be able to impose that on you. But having said that, I'm in a service business, so I'm trying very hard to do what's necessary for my clients. But again, we say in the legal business, sometimes part of what we do is protect our clients from themselves. And so, I mean, sometimes you just have to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got a couple other questions, but I want to dig into that because it's like I said, I'm involved in that men's ministry, and that's half of the group is like, how do I say no to things? Right.
Mhm.
But you hit on something else really important, is the expectations. I've caught a couple of the guys and I said, well, if you start a relationship answering your cell phone for 2 weeks and 2 seconds, you set the expectation. That's the normal in that relationship. So
Yep.
if you really look at that, and Mike, just like you and I are on this call, you can't be on your cell phone, right? Things come up.
Right.
So if you'll delay everything at least a couple hours and get organized, you don't set the expectation that you're immediately available. And then
That's correct.
for what you and I talked about, the saying no, how have you? I think that's hard for everybody. And you obviously have a way to evaluate those that have some poor practices now that they're trying to impose on your life. But what's your litmus test for saying yes and no to things?
Well, part of it just depends on how much I'm doing, and then, what's the current caseload that I'm handling, and then how much is this going to add? So, just for an example, I mean, I got some lawyer who wants to sell me on the big class action he's working on, and my response to him is, boy, that sounds like a really good case, but I'm really busy, and if I do this, I can't keep my promises to my wife, so I'm just going to have to decline. And I've just found over the years, again, it's just one of those things that you learn over practicing for years. I've found over the years that the things that I immediately have a negative reaction to, there's a reason for that. And when I press myself and push myself into that because somebody tries to pressure me into it, it generally doesn't turn out as good as I'd like for it to. And the things that, that hit me as, yeah, I'd really like to do that, are the ones that I generally enjoy the most. And I guess we all have this when we're young, which is, am I going to have enough work? Am I going to have enough income? Am I going to, be able to pay my bills and feed my family? And we all start out that way as young people. And then, we find that generally speaking, if you're good at what you do, you have plenty of work. And I think saying no is just a matter of overcoming the fear. So when you say, no, that might mean that person goes someplace else. And if it's an ongoing client, that might mean they decide to go someplace else. And it's just overcoming the fear that they'll do that. But, I decided a few years ago, I would like to control my own schedule to the extent that I can control my own schedule. And then, and sometimes that means that people's schedules that they try to impose upon me don't fit into my schedule, and I do my best to try to help them to find somebody that can do that for them. Here's the interesting thing, Colin, is that almost, I would say probably 95% of those people end up waiting for me. So, and I don't end up losing them anyway. So, that's just been my experience.
Man, you just lean into the fear, and it's not as bad of an outcome as you pose. Or long term, I found no, because early in my career, finding just saying no to certain things, like you said, looking back, you're like, man, I made that a really big deal, and it might have stung a little bit, but it was not the mountain that I made it in my mind.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's good to talk.
The other thing is nice for me, and then some people may have and may not have, but I have a great staff. I mean, I have other lawyers here in this office that I can say, hey, can you do this part of it? Because I can't do it right now, but 2 weeks from now, I'll have a little more capacity. And it's nice. I have really competent, excellent other lawyers here and a great support staff. So, if you build a good organization, it helps to be able to say no and still retain clients.
That's great. One, so you have obviously some principles that guide you, your why. How do you distill those things throughout your organization?
Well, I sort of have not very many rules. Generally speaking, I think with, and so that is straightforward. That's honesty in praising them, and then honesty in holding them accountable. And so that's one. The other thing is, you've heard the old statement, nobody cares how much you know till they know how much you care. And so I try to understand what's going on in the people who work with me and for me, what's going on in their lives, such that, and demonstrating that I have an interest in their work. And I've found that when you do that, that tends to build loyalty. And so it's worked for me. And then thirdly, and this is the third one, is the one that I've struggled with, because I've become a better delegator, but I wasn't a great delegator. And I was one of these people that had to have my hands on everything. I had to, before it went out of here with my name on it, I had to be the final checker and all this sort of stuff. And I've found over the years that the more I can involve people to make decisions on their own, and to having to have, review all the time, that it builds a sense of competence in your staff that they can do these things, and they become confident and competent. And so those, those are, I try to have very few rules, and just more like principles. And that's kind of the 3 principles that I go by.
That's great. Well, there's nothing wrong with knowing that the leader of the ship is human. And then,
yeah. Yeah, well, that's readily apparent if you're around me for very long. So.
Most of it. And I think it's a great quality, because if not, you're wearing a mask you weren't called to wear. And then, like you said, what I like is when you delegate, giving people ownership of stuff, and then knowing them well enough to call some things out specifically. It sounds like you raised up a great staff. One final question, you mentioned being stuck at home, but you have your own library, and you also mentioned Abraham Lincoln. So I think he's probably going to come back up. But if you invited somebody else in to have a seat and they could only pick a couple books to read, what books would you give them and why?
Well, again, the Doris Kearns Goodwin book on Lincoln is called Team of Rivals, is a book that I think is a must read for anybody who aspires to leadership positions. So, that would certainly be one. And I don't read a lot of novels. Just I prefer biographies and those sorts of things, historical stuff. It's just kind of what but there is one novel that I read that I considered to be maybe the greatest novel ever written, which is East of Eden. It's a John Steinbeck book, and it's a spectacular read. So if you don't mind, pouring through 800 or 900 pages, I can't remember how long it is. It's pretty long, but it's just it's got some really good philosophical stuff in it. But it's just a great read. Like if you just wanted something to read and get enjoyment out of it, I would suggest that. And you'll catch a lot of the sort of biblical references that are in there, but it's a great book. And everybody just needs time to relax. So if you want to relax, read East of Eden. Although with me, I don't know how you are with reading. When I really get into a book, I'm the kind of guy that, I'll be reading and I don't want to put it down. So I'll stay up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning reading it. And then the next morning I'm like, oh gosh, why did I do that? But it's a great book. And that Team of Rivals book. I'm also reading a biography of Martin Luther. I'm doing it in conjunction. I'm reading a book on the history of the Latin Mass in the Catholic Church. And I'm reading this book on Martin Luther, which is really interesting to do the 2 at the same time. So, that's what I'm doing now. So I'd probably recommend them. They're great books.
That's awesome. But I there's something to be said about being exhausted the next day. I think we've all been there, but I would guess that there's far more benefit out of binge reading a good book.
Yeah.
Netflix, because the culture now, they'll watch the series for 3 days, nothing out of it. At least you have some ways.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. So,
Mike, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, because there's just so many ways that people try to reach out now, what's your preferred way for people to reach out if they have a question?
Oh, I never care how people reach out. We've got a web page, a Winners King web page, that we take inquiries all the time that come in, and we try to respond to them. The telephone number is fine, and then my email appears on our website. People regularly will send me emails, with questions and that sort of stuff, and we try to answer all that as best we can. So, like if we could ever help you do something, then give us a call, send us and ask your question. We have those web inquiry things that you can type in a question.
Yeah, new digital stuff.
Yeah, things have changed. I mean, I tell the story of being a really young lawyer and needing to get a brief filed by 5 o'clock, and it was probably 15 or 20 pages, and feeding it into what we used to call a display writer, an IBM display writer with a daisy wheel, pop, 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 and standing there watching that thing, and I don't know, it would, 2 minutes a page or something like that, and things have really changed. So
yeah, it doesn't take an hour anymore.
No, what used to take me an hour takes me about 5 minutes. So that part of it's nice, although some of this technology I can do without.
I think we all could. Well, Mike, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you. This is Kellen, owner and operator of New Wave Solutions. Mike, thank you for giving to everybody today.
Hey, my pleasure. It was nice to meet you.